Good afternoon. Last time we started the theme Economy and State. I talked about the story of money, about the formation of the financial credit system. Today we will talk about mathematics and its applications to building mathematical models. There are various quotes on mathematics. Mathematics is the queen of sciences. Mathematics should be studied, if only for the fact that it puts the mind in order. Mathematics is the gymnastics of the mind. And the last one, higher mathematics kills creativity. So, regardless of whether A.A. Fursenko, being the Minister of Education and Science of the Russian Federation, said this or not, the system of education in the Russian Federation works in such a direction that people are completely mathematically illiterate, because everything related to the 4 actions of arithmetic, now it is not even necessary to count in mind, not even in a column. Every phone has a calculator, and you can count everything when you need it. When it comes to more subtle issues, and even more so, to the application of mathematical instruments to solving certain tasks of society, then people come up with big problems. In one of my lectures, which was published on YouTube, this very example was shown, and the example led to a number of comments on the theme that I was mistaken and that the error is not that there is a division by 0 when moving from the penultimate row to the last, but that the errors were somewhere earlier. Everyone found their own errors somewhere in the earlier calculations. Here is an example that shows that in fact the remaining knowledge in the field of mathematics and the skills to use this knowledge by those who responded to this example leaves much to be desired. Well, let's take a look at these calculations. First of all, the question is, what is it? This is not a formula in which you need to substitute certain values of variables and make calculations. This is not a task on the theme, simplify a mathematical expression. This is not a task on the theme, bring the original expression to a certain specific form, which would be convenient to use for solving some other tasks. Initially, this equality, A equals B. Further questions arise about how we come from A equals B to 2 equals 1. Well, of course, 2 does not equal 1. This is obvious. But, nonetheless, if we don't master the apparatus of mathematics, we make some mistakes, we can get an erroneous result without realizing the fact that this result is erroneous. We will simply get a certain result. Based on this result, we will begin to act somehow, and as a result, we will come to collapse. Further questions will arise. Is mathematics as a science to blame? Or are we to blame, as those who don't know how to use this very mathematics? If this is an equality, then we have the right to multiply the right and left sides of the equality by any number. Here, the author of this puzzle multiplied everything by a. As a result, in the left part we got a squared, and in the right part of the equality, ab. Is this permissible? Yes, it is. Equality remains. If this is an equality, we have the right to add any number to both sides of the equality. The author made it so that he added a squared to both parts of a. The third row appeared. After that, on the left side of the equation, he adds a squared and a squared. He gets 2a squareds. Everything is flawless. The right side of the equality remains the same as it was. A squared plus ab. What's further? Further, we have the right to subtract any number from both sides of the equality. The author subtracts 2ab from both parts. The equality remains. After that, in the next row, on the left side of the equality, 2a squared minus 2ab remains, and on the right side, a squared minus ab. Further, on the left side, 2 is taken out of the parenthesis, and the penultimate row appears. On the right side of the equality, parentheses and 1s outside the parentheses appear. Further, when moving to the last row, a squared minus ab in the right and left parts are reduced. For those who don't remember, the reduction of the members of the right and left sides of the equality is a division by the number itself. In this case, it is the division by the parenthesis a squared minus ab, and as a result we get 2 equal to 1. If we look at the first row, then a is equal to b. Accordingly, the product ab is a squared or b squared, however you like. But anyhow, it should be noted that a is equal to b, and accordingly a squared minus ab is 0, and this is a division by 0. What are the mistakes of the previous rows? Well, not a single person who is literate in mathematical notation can say it. There are no errors. All actions are formally flawlessly correct. And even the equality in the penultimate row is fulfilled thanks to the fact that 2 and 1 on the right and left sides are equally multiplied by 0, and accordingly 0 is equal to 0. But if we move b from the right side to the left in the first row, we get a minus b equal to 0. That is, a minus b is anyway equal to 0. In other words, everything is mathematically strict and correct. Then a simple question arises. What relation does the whole thing have towards politics, social governance, and governance towards the economy? This has the most direct relation, because society is a plurality. The economy is a plurality of enterprises, and a plurality of people who work in every enterprise, in all of them. Pluralities are described by statistics. When you hear the word statistics, and you are engaged in practical activities, you must somehow consider this word. And what you consider you must correlate with real life. In order to use the apparatus of the probability theory and mathematical statistics, it is necessary to know differential and integral calculus. Because the entire apparatus of mathematical statistics and probability theory is built on the knowledge of what the derivative is, the knowledge of what the integral is, and how the derivative is related to the integral. If we are talking about the economy, then the economy is an exchange of products. Product exchange processes, like other exchange processes, are described by matrix and vector models. In order to use them, you need to know what a matrix is, what a vector is, how operations with matrices and vectors are performed. If you don't know this, then the word statistics for you is an empty word. You don't know how to correlate it with life. At best, you will analyze tables, sometimes multi-line tables, in some situations, multi-volume tables. And as far as the questions of the economy, that is, the national economy and governance in the national economy are concerned, this for you will be actually unimaginable, because the transfer processes are described precisely by matrix and vector models. And no other education, except for mathematics, will allow you to independently understand what is happening in these spheres of activity in the life of society. And in this case, you, having found yourself in a position of power, will be a hostage of those subordinates who form your opinion on certain questions. In some cases, you will not be able to bring them out into the open, and you are doomed in this case to be a victim of manipulation. No other education in this case can replace mathematical literacy, not law, not socio-philosophical, not political science, not sociological education. In order for all this to be governerially consistent, lawyers, sociologists, social philosophers, political scientists in the first 2 years must be severely violated by higher mathematics, mathematical analysis, linear algebra, and other branches of mathematics. Then they will be able to describe society with mathematical models, understand the mathematical models that describe society, and, accordingly, the quality of governance will be different. This is what concerns the activities of deputies and officials from the lowest municipal level to the level of parliament, the level of government, and the apparatus of the head of state. Illiteracy in the field of mathematics in our time is unacceptable, because in this case, sovereignty cannot be ensured. Now let's go further. In fact, the picture is simple. Output of products by sectors of the national economic complex or the world economy. On the one side of the scale, this is the spectrum of production. On the other side of the scale, it is the volume of means of payment accompanying the product exchange in the production process. And we must understand that the volume of output of products by all sectors of the macroeconomic system at all times, with any character of culture, technology, and organization of the economy, is conditioned by the energy supply capacity of the macroeconomic system. In other words, you cannot get more products from the economy than you put energy into the macroeconomic system, and more than the energy conversion efficiency of technology, organization, and logistics procedures in this very economy allows. Then the question arises of how to model, how to describe these very processes. So we find ourselves in such conditions that the only models that are based on real indicators of the economy are balance models. One must be able to use them, one must be able to build them. So let's get down to it. We can, of course, draw a picture in which each sector is represented as a square or some other block shape. Then draw a lot of arrows from one sector that lead to all other sectors that receive the products of this sector. And accordingly, when we depict the whole plurality of sectors in this way, they will all be tied up with some arrows that come from one sector and go to other sectors. With each arrow, we can connect some intensity of the product flow and attach it to an inscription that sector number such and such has supplied the sector with such and such products in such and such quantities. Yes, we will get a picture, a product exchange scheme, and we will have some idea of what is happening in the economy. The presentation will be figurative. Yes, it will be useful. Nevertheless, based on it, we will not be able to say what production capacity we need in order to get everything that is required in society. Therefore, in such a situation, whether we like it or not, we are forced to use mathematics. If we do not know mathematics even to the extent that school gives, then everything that follows will be incomprehensible. So let's enumerate all the sectors that we can single out in the economy according to the attribute specifics of technology, on the basis of which this or that product is produced. The whole plurality of products that interest us, which are in the economy, and we will get a list of sectors numbered from 1 to n. Next point. Every sector has some kind of gross power. To put it another way, within a certain time, produces a certain amount of a product, its own product, specific, irreplaceable by products of other sectors, again according to the principle of the peculiarity of the technology on the basis of which the product is produced. That is, if you produce bricks on the basis of two different technologies, then in this approach you will have two sectors producing seemingly the same brick. Bricks based on one technology is one sector. Bricks based on another technology is another sector. So we get a column that contains all the gross capacities of the sectors that are of interest to us. Well then, if we are governors, we ask ourselves the question, where does the entire product that these sectors produce go to? Well, the scheme of product exchange will show us that part of this product is consumed by other sectors, and part of the output produced by all sectors goes directly to the consumption of society. This sentence can be written down mathematically as shown in this scheme. Formula 1 in parentheses. Xith equals further the summation sign. The summation goes along j from 1 to n, and then alpha ith, jth, multiplied by xith, and plus fith. Here in this entry, alpha ith, jth, is the share of the products of sector I, which sector I has supplied to the sector with the number j. The summation sign is just an abbreviation of the entry, because otherwise we would have to rewrite all the shares that sector I has supplied to all other sectors. And fith is what went to the consumption of society. Well, here is a concrete example. Let's say we produced coal. Where did this coal go? Coal went to the energy sector, coal went to metallurgists, coal went to chemists. If we live in the era of steam locomotives and steamers, then a certain amount of coal went to railroad workers, and a certain amount of coal went to seamen. Next, some coal went into households in order to heat the stove, to heat the boiler houses. All this in relation to the coal industry is described by this row xith, where I is the number of the coal industry, =, and then the sum of all that went to production consumption, that is, power engineers, metallurgists, railroad workers, seamen. And what became the final consumption, for the sake of which, in fact, we run the economy. This is what is consumed by households. This notation includes two components on the right side of the equality. What is under the sigma sign, the sign of summation? This is production consumption, and F is the final product, for the sake of which we started our economic activity. Further on, we have an explanation of all this. The question arises: if sectors consume the products of other sectors, then a natural question comes: how much do they consume? The answer to this question is conditioned organizationally, technologically. Suppose you are going to produce sausage, and you want to put 100,000 tons of sausage on the market. How much meat do you need? How much water do you need? How much salt do you need? How much seasonings do you need? How many sausage casings do you need? The answers to all these questions are conditioned by the recipe according to which you will produce the sausage. If you want to produce one sort of sausage, there will be one recipe. If you want to produce a different sort of sausage, there will be a different recipe. But in any case, your needs for products from other sectors, meat, water, seasonings, salt, will be conditioned by the recipe and accordingly will be proportional to the volume of production that you want to put onto the market. This circumstance enables us to build equality 2. In it, on the left side, the components that we summed up in equality 1, alpha ith, jth, multiplied by x ith on the left, it is equal to a ith, jth, multiplied by x jth. This row means that the supply of products of our sector I to other sectors is proportional to the gross output of those sectors. And the proportionality coefficients on the right side, ith, jth, are the coefficients of direct costs. And each such coefficient is equal to the number of products of sector I, which is necessary for the production of a unit of accounting for the output of sector J, with the proviso, with the existing technologies, organization, and culture of production. In other words, if your recipe requires 800 kilograms of meat to produce a ton of sausage, and the system is built in such a way that 200 kilograms of meat will be squandered or stolen by personnel, this means that you really need a ton of meat per ton of sausage. And in this respect, balance models are omnivorous, because they are able to describe the real culture of production that is, which includes real technologies, recipes, and ingredient composition which is necessary for the production of certain types of products, and the culture of production that actually exists. How much will be stolen? How much will be thrown into the trash? How much production waste there will be if following the technological discipline? That is, this will be completely adequate to what is happening in the real economy, on the condition that you collect reliable information about what is happening. After you get equality 2, you can substitute these ratios into equality 1. Further, in order not to write a lot of rows, we turn to a compact matrix vector notation. As a result, we get the equation in matrix form. E minus a multiplied by x equals f. E is the identity matrix, a square table in which, along the diagonal, going from the upper left corner to the lower right corner, there are ones everywhere. This is called the main diagonal. There are zeros above and below the main diagonal. Where does the matrix E come from? Matrix E appears when we transfer the sum expressed in Formula 1 to the left part. Then in some cases, I will be equal to j. And then there appears this very 1, multiplied by the parenthesis 1 minus a ith jth by x jth. If we enter everything in a matrix and vector form, then expression 1 is transformed into expression 3. A matrix that includes all coefficients of direct costs, and thus, together with matrix E, it describes all production, our entire production culture. X is the column vector of the gross capacities of the sectors that we take into account in the balance sheet. And F is the column vector of the final product, that is, all these remainders that were not consumed during production, if we correlate with Formula 1. As you can see, in fact, everything is within the boundaries of the 4 operations of arithmetic, and the mathematics that we all studied in school, at least in high school. That is, what is entered in the matrix and vector form is simply a compact entry of linear equations. Instead of writing n rows of linear equations, we write one row, implying certain rules for unpacking this one row into a certain plurality of linear equations. All equations are structurally the same. That is, there is nothing complicated here either. Equation 3 allows you to answer the question, what the gross capacity of sectors should be like. That is, column vector x, in order to get the desired amount of the final product, column vector f, f means final, with those technologies and production organizations that exist and are described by matrix A, the coefficients of direct costs. Further, the question arises about the governerial interpretation of the obtained equations. What is included in the final product f? First of all, it includes transferring remainders of product I, which were not produced in previous production cycles and were not consumed in them. In addition, there is included the saldo of the export-import balance of the production-consumption system for product number I. Exports are included with a plus sign, imports with a minus sign. Further, it includes the part of products that are transferred to households for their livelihood, i.e., what is consumed by the population directly. The final product F includes what is transferred to the bodies of state power outside the state sector of the national economy, and the purpose of which is the economic support of state politics and the activities of the state apparatus. That is, everything which is transferred to the armed forces, special services, and bodies of state power. And what belongs to the enterprises of the state sector remains in the composition of the equations as enterprises belonging to one or another sector on the basis of technological specifics. Well, then there is such a thing: equipment, fundamental structure, objects of infrastructure facilities wear out during operation. In addition, due to scientific technological progress, some of them simply become obsolete, even if they remain usable. This circumstance requires the replacement of means of production, infrastructure facilities, with new ones. Further, if we don't have enough production capacities in order to increase output in the next production cycles, we also need fundamental structures, infrastructure facilities, and production equipment. All this can be summarized in the term investment products, and they are also one of the parts of column vector F. That is, column vector F must be governerially represented as the sum of several column vectors, each of which has a certain specificity in terms of who needs it and why. In other words, there will be what is consumed by society and households, there will be a saldo of the export-import balance, there will be a share of the product consumed by the state, and there will be investment products. We considered the building of an input-output balance in the physical accounting of products. That is, everything was simple. Accounting was carried out in tons, in pieces, in liters or cubic meters, or otherwise, but the accounting was physical. Physical accounting means that the quantity of each product corresponds to a description of the quality of this product, that is, some of its characteristics. And with this approach, it turns out that if we consider the automotive industry as a sector, then with the physical accounting of the product, the automotive industry will be presented as a certain set of sectors, because multicolored vehicles are already a plurality of technologies, because quality indicators, in particular paints, will be different. And accordingly, in this physical accounting, every product that has its own peculiarity, not only in terms of design or ingredient composition, but in terms of color, packaging, or something else, will have its own row of the equation. Well, it is clear that the modern economy produces tens of thousands of types, if not hundreds of thousands of products, every one of which has some peculiarity, due to which there has to be a row in the input-output balance equations for every one of these products. Yes, of course, matrix A with this approach will contain many zeros, because not all sectors exchange products with each other, but the dimensionality of this matrix will be very large, and hardly easy for the information collection system and for modern computing machinery. Therefore, it turns out that the balance model with physical accounting of products allows us to understand what is connected in the national economy with each other and how. But it does not allow to use it in practice, and it does not really allow to organize on its basis full-fledged governance towards the national economy, or to introduce the national economy into an acceptable mode of self-governance. Therefore, the first task is to reduce the dimensionality of the system of linear equations. So, if we want to reduce the dimensionality of the system of linear equations, we must go from physical accounting to cost accounting. And if we have the coefficients of the direct costs in the form of the amount of products of the sector and the required for the output of products units of accounting of sector J, then if we multiply such a coefficient by the ratio of the prices of the unit of accounting of the products of sectors I and J, here is Pith divided by J. This is the price of the unit of accounting of sector I, referred to the price of the unit of accounting of products of sector J. Then we get the cost coefficients already in the cost form. And every such cost coefficient will denote how much money must be spent on the products of sector I in order for sector J to produce a volume of products in the cost of one unit of payment. That is, if we are talking about, say, the interconnection between agriculture and agricultural engineering, then this is the answer to the question of how many rubles are needed to buy agricultural equipment in order to get 1 ruble of agricultural products at constant prices, prices of the period to which the balance belongs. After substitution, the dimensionality of the task at the first step remains the same. That is, the sectors are the way they were. Each has a technological peculiarity. The structure of the task remains the same. Matrix E minus matrix A, all this in brackets is multiplied by vector x and is equal to f. Vectors x and f, in this case they are also in cost form. But after we have switched to the cost form of accounting, we have the right to add together the rubles that belong to different sectors. And if in the past we did not have the right to add liters of milk with the amount of grain, now we have the right to add rubles, which refer to liters of milk, and rubles, which refer to the amount of grain. And there are special aggregation algorithms that allow you, according to discretion, to combine rows and columns in such balance models, and due to this, reduce the number of rows and columns, reduce the dimensionality of the task, and get, in fact, a model with which you can already work in practice of governance. But the model in the cost form of accounting is no longer the same as the model in physical accounting, because if we build the model in physical accounting on the basis of the technological diversity of sectors, on the basis of the technological specificity of the output of every one of the products that interests us, then the cost model can already be interpreted as oriented on the functions that every one of the products performs. If these functions are the same, then we can group products. Therefore, food products are one thing, household products are another, products consumed by the state are the third, machine tool equipment is a fourth, regardless of the variety of equipment, and so on and so forth. Due to this, the dimensionality of our task is significantly reduced, and we can analyze the financial interconnections between sectors and society, between the state and sectors, between the state and society. That is, it is already a different quality. But when we move on to this different quality, we must remember that it's not money that the rich eat. Money is simply an instrument. Money is some nominals behind which there stand certain types of products, every one of which has its own quality characteristics, both in the aspect of its production and in the aspect of its consumption. This is the scheme about which I spoke before starting the building of a mathematical model of input-output balances. Here, production sectors are indicated by rectangles with mnemonic indices. 1. Agriculture, hunting, fishing. 2. Energy production. 3. Raw materials extraction. 4. Food industry. 5. Technological preparation of energy carriers for their intended use. 6. Production of structural materials, and so on. This scheme is presented and described in detail in the monograph Economics of Innovative Development. Further, Block 18 MSP is precisely the sphere of production, the market of the sphere of production. 19 MCP is the market of consumer products. 20 is the state apparatus as a consumer. But if within Block 18 MSP we can use only physical indicators, if we have enough computing power to collect information, then outside this block, although we can use physical indicators, we can use them limitedly. Outside of this block, consumption of products occurs, and is not described by the balanced model of product exchange, which we considered earlier. Due to this circumstance, we, in some way, need to link this picture and balance models. Now let's look at the one on the left. Here is a table called Product Exchange and Cost Balance. Block A is Productive Product Exchange. It includes all the components of matrix A, multiplied by the corresponding components of column vector X. That is, Block A for us describes the productive product exchange. Block B includes two columns. One column is called return, and that's all that relates to the final product. This is the column vector F, F1, F2, and Fn. These are all the sectors that we take into consideration in cost accounting, not with technology-based physical accounting of products, but with cost accounting, when we combine products according to their functional purpose. The second column in Block B is the gross capacity of sectors, that is, it is column vector X. Column vector X characterizes everything that we produce, and vector F is a useful return. That is, in the cost form, the ratio of the sum of the components of vector F to the sum of the components of vector X is the energy conversion efficiency of our economic system. That is, the more we get the final product with the minimum amount of produced product in general, the more efficient our economy is. This is what exists only with cost accounting. Therefore, let's see what the structure of Block A gives us. If we consider any sector represented in Block A and go along the row that corresponds to it, then this sector appears before us as a seller of products, since it acts as a supplier for other sectors. Other sectors consume its products for the needs of their own production. If we understand that all sectors pay for the delivery of products, then the row gives us an idea of the income structure of the sector we are considering. If we turn to consideration of the column of Block A, which corresponds to the sector we are considering, then in this case, the sector acts as a consumer of products of other sectors, and in the financial aspect, it acts as a buyer. Accordingly, the columns of Block A give us an idea of the structure of expenditures of sectors that they are forced to carry out to satisfy the needs of their own production. If we go along the column of Block A, from the first row to the last, then we get a structure of payment by us for deliveries that we order from other producers for the needs of our own production. Well, of course, we come to the end of the column and find out that these are not all the expenditures that connect us with our production activity. Because besides the fact that we pay for delivery of products that we want for the needs of our own production, we also have to conduct a whole bunch of other payments. We must pay salaries to the staff, we must pay taxes to the state, we must pay back to credit institutions, pay to a pension fund, insurance organizations, and therefore, below Block A, we have Block C. Block C is the same as what is now called value-added or factor costs. Factor costs are staff salaries, taxes, credit balance, insurance balance, payments to the pension fund. Well, further there arise questions related to what payments we should include here. You see, the structure of the balance model, in the form we built it, and in the form it's presented here in this table, is such that Block A includes only what is produced and gives production return in the production cycle we are considering. That is, if in the course of our activity in this production cycle, we build a certain plant that does not give production returns in the production cycle, but gives production returns in subsequent production cycles, in such a model the plant turns out to be represented not inside Block A, but inside Block B. It belongs to the category of investment products that will give production returns in subsequent production cycles. To put it another way, Block A of the next production cycle will not be the same as Block A of this production cycle due to the fact that we have a number of new factories. The coefficients of direct costs will change, i.e. the entire matrix and vector x of gross capacities will change in some way, because new plants, new production capacities will be some kind of supplementation. And accordingly it turns out that at the macroeconomic level, the structure of Block C is an instrument in macroeconomic governance, because everything we put in there in factor costs, in fact, is a source of financing for some expenditures, those which are functionally specialized. And for these functions, products have to be produced. That is, there has to be a return as part of Block F. This means that Block C, value-added or factor costs, must actually be represented by a number of rows. And depending on how many rows of what functional purpose we will set, this will provide us with this or that mode of assembling a macroeconomic system from a variety of enterprises. This will provide us with this or that mode of functioning of the macroeconomic system. In this case, it turns out that depending on the composition of the rows that we include in Block C or exclude from Block C, some funds, from which we can pay for this or that consumption, disappear. Well, then a simple market law works. If there is solvent demand, then sooner or later there will be some kind of product supply for it. If there is no solvent demand, or it has in some way been destroyed, then, even if there were some production capacities that ensured the production of this type of product, sooner or later they will wither and wilt, go bankrupt, or be reprofiled for the production of some other product. Therefore, it turns out that if we correlate life with this very table, then the structure of Block C is set by such a document as the chart of accounts. The chart of accounts, or some functional analog of it, is not an objective given, but it is a product of lawmaking. It is a product of lawmaking in every society. In every state, a certain group of people is involved in lawmaking. Either it is a junta, or it is the parliament, or something else. But, nevertheless, this is a group of people who need to understand what they are doing. But we live in a country where the chart of accounts is not viewed as an instrument of macroeconomic governance. Which accounts, and on the basis of what considerations it allows, which ones it prohibits, none of the legislators can say, including because they are mathematically illiterate. They are not able to build a balance model. They are not able to give out a governerial interpretation of balance models. Here is the following phrase: the main balance ratio. The main balance ratio is presented in the lower right corner, below Block B, on the right of Block C. Its essence is that the sum of all values added produced by all sectors is equal to the value of the final product. If we are talking about the development of the economy, then investment products should be somehow reflected in the chart of accounts, and they should be present in vector F. If there is a chart of accounts, and is structured in a governerially literate way, then it should ensure such instruments of macroeconomic governance as grants that are paid to producers in order to ensure that production volumes correspond to social needs, which would protect sales. These are subsidies that are paid to consumers of products, and accordingly, there should be clear algorithmics for the distribution of state and corporate salaries, pensions, other benefits, taxes and tax benefits, grants to producers, subsidies to consumers, and so on. In fact, the keys to understanding everything lie through the main balance ratio. The sum of all values added in sectors should be equal to the sum of the value of the entire final product. And accordingly, the emissional policy of the state should be linked to this balance ratio. If this is not the case, then in the entire system of product exchange of the economic interconnections between sectors, financial interconnections between the state and production sectors, financial interconnections between society and the state and sectors, imbalances will arise that will generate a lot of troubles in society, which will then have to be disentangled for many years. And accordingly, the question arises about the structure of functionally conditioned expenditures of enterprises, which would ensure the assembly of the macroeconomic system into a single whole, so that the macroeconomic system works for the interests of social development. Functionally conditioned expenditures are not of equal priority. On the right of the slide, they are presented in the order in which their significance decreases, if we proceed from the task of assembling a macroeconomic system out of administratively isolated enterprises belonging to different sectors. Expenditure number 1 is expenditures for maintaining the current activity of enterprises and sectors. They include the costs of intermediate products received from suppliers and payments to staff. That is, this is the column of Block A, and the row element of the salary of Block C. All subsequent functionally conditioned expenditures of enterprises are rows in value-added factor costs. If we consider the entire set of sectors, or an element of the corresponding sector column, if we consider only the column that corresponds to the sector. The second group of expenditures are expenditures for ensuring the functioning of the enterprise in the future. The expenditures for ensuring the functioning of the enterprise in the future are the expenditures connected with depreciation payments and payments to the fund for the reconstruction and development of enterprises. The third group of expenditures are expenditures for ensuring the social responsibility of business. What do we have now? There is, for example, a small settlement where a bridge has fallen. Then what happens next? In the end, in the course of the direct line, someone turns to Vladimir Vladimirovich and complains that the bridge has not been built. Vladimir Vladimirovich gives instructions to the local administration, and they seek funds to build the bridge. But in most cases, there is some kind of city-forming enterprise, or there is a certain amount, maybe not a single enterprise, that is located in this region. And if in the row value added, there is the component social responsibility of business, then local enterprises can finance the repair and construction of this bridge on the most legal basis, without the need to contact the head of state during the direct line. Yes, the legislation on financial and economic activities in this case should provide some tax incentives for enterprises that perform socially significant functions and thereby exempt bodies of state power from solving any problems. Well, since the trouble-free operation of any equipment is impossible in principle, either by reason of unpredictable breakdowns of equipment or by reason of personnel errors, then the need to create some kind of financial reserves, necessary in the case of emergencies, accidents, or disasters, is inevitable. These payments are necessary to compensate for damage and to restore the functionality of the enterprise itself. or to restore order in the external environment. Therefore, payments to various kinds of insurance funds, both of the enterprises themselves and of external insurance funds, are really necessary. Further, there arise questions about crediting, because crediting is of two types. Short-term crediting, which is necessary in order to overcome some cash gaps, that is, the payment schedule is now such that we have to pay, but there is no money. We will have money in a while, but we need to make payments now. Here, short-term crediting is needed for this. Long-term crediting is usually investment loans, but it's also necessary. Further, if the enterprise is private or joint stock, it is entrepreneurial income. It should be, otherwise it makes no sense for the owners and owners' shareholders to be the owners of this enterprise. The seventh is retained earnings. Retained earnings, if we consider the macroeconomic system as a whole, from the standpoint of the theory of governance, is the margin of stability of the enterprise. That is, retained earnings, they should always be in the normal mode of governance towards the enterprise, in a normally formed financial climate, which is designed for the economy to develop innovatively and satisfy the needs of the population of the state itself, but not the needs of some oligarchic grouping, the needs of transnational oligarchic groupings in relation to whom the population of the state is simply cattle and an economic resource. And so it turns out that the saldo of taxes, grants, and subsidies is in the 8th place in terms of significance. And if, for example, we turn to the economies of different states, then tax crimes in the United States are crimes. Tax crimes in Russia, non-payment of taxes, are also a crime. And in Japan, tax crimes are a very specific thing, because late tax payments can be forgiven or restructured without any penalties against whoever did it. Because the inability to pay taxes in a stably functioning economy is not always the result of the fact that the enterprise is misgoverned. This may be the result of the state's misgovernance towards the macroeconomy. And the stability of the macroeconomic system is such that it may be socially purpose-consonant to restructure or forgive tax arrears in order for the economy to produce what society needs. But if you don't go into intersectoral relations, do not go into the governerial interpretation of balance models, then late payment of taxes is something bad. But the governerially illiterate deputies, the government, they stand on the fact that this bad thing must be ceased. Further, if you look at the financial portraits of sectors based on the structure of functionally conditioned expenditures, which was presented on the previous slide, then this is the financial press under which real production is located. Here, functionally conditioned expenditures are lines and columns between the abbreviations, which are called FCLD, functionally conditioned level of expenditures. It includes all previous expenditure levels in descending order of significance, plus the current expenditures, as shown in this formula. This is the financial layer. If you want the economy to produce a certain final product, vector F, you must set up this financial layer in such a way that the economy is able, firstly, to give out this final product, and secondly, so that the economy is such that in it, there should be a solvent demand for this product. Because if there is no solvent demand, then the products are not sold, production enterprises go bankrupt, and then a wave of bankruptcies rolls along the entire chain, through the chains of technological exchange of products produced in this entire set of sectors. And, in order to use this, balance models are also needed. Here is a scheme of financial exchange between different sectors of the production sector of the economy and the banking sector of the economy and industry. So, when I talked about the financial credit system, I said that there is a question: how much money is there in the financial credit system? And there are two answers to it. The first answer, we ask the central bank. If we have the authority, then the central bank reports how much money there is in circulation. The second answer is that in circulation, in the financial credit system, there is always 100% of money. and the share of this 100% is only expressed in certain denominations. Further, it was said that if we move to the financial credit system, in which there is always 100% of money, then any verbal fornication on the theme of economics stops, because everything becomes obvious. The scheme represents the interconnections between the banking sector of the world economy and the production sector of any economy. Look, there is extraction and primary processing of raw materials and energy carriers. The second block, the production of technological equipment, buildings, and infrastructure facilities. The third block is the production of products for non-industrial consumption. The fourth block is the population and bodies of state power. The arrows show the direction of movement of the money supply, that is, who pays for what and how. So, suppose the banking sector issues some kind of loans to all four blocks, and then the time comes that the loans are paid back. And it turns out that if we are in the financial credit system, in which there is always 100% of money, then, regardless of the denominations, the purchasing power flows unidirectionally from the production sector and from society to the banking sector. Further, at the next stage, under the impact of the inflown purchasing power, the production sector of the economy is reoriented towards servicing the banking sector. Hence, this is where the following comes from: yachts, villas, massive poverty of the population, the inability of the state to fulfill its social obligations, and so on and so forth. That is, the conclusion is governerially significant and simple. If a country is sovereign, then there should be an institution of lending in it, but it should be interest-free lending, as it was said in the Quran 1,300 years ago. If a society allows lending at interest, then it is economically and financially non-sovereign. This society is slaves, hostages of the owners and governors of the transnational usurious corporation whose interests are represented in the territory of Russia by the central bank. Next, there is another interesting point. This scheme, price and volume of supply, is present in almost all textbooks of economics, but there is no governerial, macroeconomic interpretation of this scheme in any textbook of economics. Now let's take a look. This dependence really exists. It can be traced. If the volume of supply of a good is insufficient in relation to the needs of society, then access to this good is always through payment. The less the volume of supply, the higher the price. This is not accessible to everyone. Potential consumers, living by the principle, cut your coat according to your cloth, looking into their wallets, they see that they can't afford it. They can't afford to consume this. If goods are provided in such a quantity that there is enough for everyone, the price is zero. If the volume of provision of a good falls, then a price appears. So, for the first time in Japan, back in the 1960s and 70s, there appeared oxygen bars, where one could breathe fresh air for a certain fee. In megalopolises, there are fee-paying beaches, parks. This is a normal thing. Somewhere in the rural outback, if you put a ticket office on the beach, you will not be understood, because next to the fenced area, there are quite good beaches where you can relax for free. In fact, this means that the price current for goods and services of final consumption in society is a financial expression of the vector of error of governance. Now let's see how all this correlates with the balance models. Well, suppose we are considering a certain product and the dependence of supply volume price. It is as shown in this picture. Well, let us further assume that in order for a society to live well in the aspect of consumption, this good should be provided to society in the amount Q1. Price C1 corresponds to the volume of provision Q1. Well, then it turns out that the price C1 is less than the profitability threshold of the production of this good. And in order for the production of this good in the current financial climate to be profitable, price C2 is required, which is obviously greater than the profitability threshold of the production of this good. But this price corresponds to the volume of production Q2, and Q2 is significantly lower than the needs of society for this good, which ensures social development. The question arises, what to do in this case? Liberal market views say that nothing needs to be done. The market will regulate everything by itself. That is, if the price falls below the profitability threshold, then some enterprises will close down, the price will rise, production will become profitable, the sales will be insured. For example, during the Great Depression in the USA, power plants were stoked with grain in order to raise the price above the threshold of profitability. And according to studies of the Great Depression, almost more people died from hunger in the USA during this Great Depression than died in our country during collectivization. Therefore, liberals are actually cannibals, though not literally, but financial cannibals. If we understand that in the financial credit system, money is always 100%, then this means that if somewhere the price falls below the threshold of profitability, then in some other sectors, the price of their products is such that these sectors receive super profits, which they cannot realize for the benefit of society, neither improving, expanding their production, nor paying large salaries to their personnel, and not paying large dividends to the owners. If these big salaries and big dividends are paid, then some part of the population will go beyond the limits of sufficient consumption and begin to luxuriate, and this is already harmful to society. To put it another way, if we have super profits easily and simply, then on their basis, we can pay grants to sectors that produce products in the quantities necessary for society. But the market price, which has fallen below the production profitability threshold, well, as it is known, in Russia they are proud of the fact that we have a flat scale of taxes, and the transition to progressive taxation, when excessive profits are withdrawn and excessive incomes are withdrawn simply by law, is viewed as an unacceptable matter. As a result, we have been living in conditions of economic genocide for more than 20 years. The country is simply dying out, due to the fact that for our legislators and politicians, the liberal market, this is sacred. It cannot be encroached upon or touched. But still, if we correlate with the macroeconomy, which should be socially oriented, then the financial climate should be regulated so that it's profitable to produce everything that is necessary for social development. Income should be such that it's possible to consume what is necessary for social development. And the mechanism for distributing grants and subsidies should protect solvent demand from all sorts of speculative gains and from Maslow's pyramid, when the unequal priority of needs leads to the growth of incomes of the population, or some social groups simply cause an increase in prices for products of higher priority groups, primarily food, and payments in the interests of social development, which are lower priorities than just the priority of psychological survival, as a result, become impossible. This is about the fact that if you do not know mathematics, do not know probability theory, mathematical statistics, differential and integral calculus, matrix and vector calculus, if you don't know all this, then sovereignty, and above all financial economic sovereignty, is impossible to ensure. And in fact, in the sphere of politics and state governance, such ignoramuses have nothing to do, because they are doomed to be hostages of consultants, many of whom will manipulate politicians and legislators in the interests of Russia's geopolitical competitors and opponents. But again, if the electorate is illiterate and does not understand what intersectoral ties are, what the financial credit system is, then the elections for them turn into a game of thimbles. That is, for whatever thimble, for whatever party symbols you vote, CPRF, United Russia, Liberal Democratic Party, and so on. Then further on it reminds me of an episode from the film Weather is Good on Deribasovskaya. it rains again on Brighton Beach, where they say, there is no sphere there. If by the sphere we mean competence that can ensure the functioning of the economy, ensuring the development of society. If something is not clear, then there is literature on mathematics, at least a course in higher mathematics, articles on Wikipedia, which allow you to understand what a derivative is, what an integral is, how to use it, what matrices are, and how rows of linear equations are folded into matrix vector calculus that we know from the school mathematics course. Shortly speaking, people, you need to educate yourselves, because on the basis of what you were taught at school, and on the basis of that remaining knowledge, that does not allow you to see even elementary errors in mathematical calculations, you cannot live like this. You cannot live as a free person. You are doomed to be slaves and servants of the ones who will exploit the difference in the measure of understanding of how the economy functions, how to govern it in their own interests, and how to govern it to the detriment of the interests of other people.